welcome guys, welcome to another video. I know, we're doing another tier list here. This actually, believe it or not, is not the video I woke up this morning anticipating I would make, but I've made a tier list here, inspired by another video I was writing through, and I was thinking about new playable races. Now, let's be clear, there probably aren't ever going to be any new playable races in Guild Wars 2, at least not in the short term. I really don't believe that Tengu's coming with End of Dragons. I don't know whether they really ever cared to add them. You would have thought at some point over 10 years whether they can. There's a lot of reasons why it's problematic for Guild Wars, down to the commander's voice, down to, you know, armor mapping, and there's just a question of how much money would be spent on an idea like that a lot of players aren't even into. I know, I get it. But I still think that there's a lot of cool ideas for new playable races. I like to believe that maybe one day after End of Dragons, the devs might do it. The community certainly over the years has gone over this discussion a lot. So I wanted to do a tier list that looks at basically the sentient races of Tyria. Look at Tyria as it exists, the lore today. What would be the coolest playable races? Because, of course, we all say Tengu, right? And we're all thinking Tengu because there's a lot of Tengu influences in Cantha. But what else? You know, for a lot of people, they're just going to look at that and say, well, stupid bird people. Maybe there's other cool things out there. So that's what this tier list is. And unlike the other tier lists that I've done recently, I'm really looking forward to this one because I think I can be very concrete about it. Like, we're not whiffy-waffly, like when we're rating all the core professions and saying, oh, they'll all generally be in the B rank or whatever. No. I think there are very, very clear lines on which we can rate some of them as excellent candidates to be playable races and some as not excellent candidates to be playable races. The logic's pretty airtight. So, let's see what we've got. And, of course, there'll be a bit of opinion here, but I don't think this is going to be very wishy-washy at all. Let's jump in. Now, I filtered in, oh god, a few races here, and they've shuffled them, so it'll come in at any old random order. I guess actually, I'm going to skip the order, and I'm going to start us off with Tengu, okay? Tengu's like a free slot. It's in the middle of our bingo board or whatever. To me, Tengu is S+. All right, I'm just going to put it, and by the way, I set these tiers up. I've just added S+ in addition to the standard ones. I'm putting Tengu here, S+ at the beginning. I don't think it's very arguable that Tengu are a great race idea. They're fairly unique in as much as you don't always see bird races in competing MMOs. They're fairly well established and fleshed out within Guild Wars lore. There's a lot of cool stuff, particularly within the Canthan factions expansion, but even in a lot of prophecies areas where Tengu were there. The whole idea of the Dominion of Winds, and, you know, how they translated over those 250 years. There's a lot to dive into. There's also a lot of different variations, like in how they can appear. When you think about how successful the Sylvari are as a playable race, I mean, surely a part of that, at least a part of that, is how customizable they are and all the different skin tones and so on. And we've seen with End of Dragons Press, you can do a lot of really exotic, cool kinds of Tengu. They're a fan favorite. They have to go in S+, and they're a fan favorite for me too. Okay, so that's the free square in the middle. I do appreciate some of you guys might not like them very much, but let's be real. This is a pretty high bar. You guys are going to see some shoddy races on this list. But what I've chosen to be on the tier list is sentience, okay, of some form. Which leads us into the regular ones. Now, they're coming at a random angle, and I think a great example straight away is this Harpies. Okay, now, where do we rate Harpies as playable? Well, I think they're pretty bad. The shape of the body. Well, first of all, aren't they all female? Are there male Harpies? Oh, my lore is actually failing me here. I mean, the idea that you can't actually gender one of the races, I actually think is kind of an interesting idea. I remember way back when they were even talking about the Sylvari being like that, maybe. But I don't know, man. Harpies are lame. I don't like Harpies. Can you imagine if they'd voiced the Harpy commander screeching your way through the personal story and stuff? I mean, it's kind of a gimmicky, funny character. I suppose that's an interesting idea. But it's just not going to work, right? In any kind of emotional moment in the story, you're just not going to be able to buy that character. You've also got the problem of them flying, which I know, yeah, when we think about in-game engine, they tend to be hovering near ground level. I know at this point we all wear giant wings on our backpacks and stuff, and we're all gliding everywhere. As a gliding candidate, I kind of think Harpy would be kind of cool. But I don't know. I don't see this. I don't even really see this mapping very well onto like light armor, like a caster Harpy or a heavy armored Harpy. I mean, heavy armor and medium kind of work a bit better. Now, I'm putting this down. Harpy's at D tier. I don't like it at all. Oh, God. The next one that's come out randomly is this, Quaggan. Playable Quaggan, guys. I'm sorry, they got to go to D as well. I mean, they're bad in all the same ways that Harpies are bad. I suppose I could buy... Now, I'm deadly serious right now. I could buy a commander that is a Quaggan. A lot better than I could buy a Harpy. Quagons are actually, like, intelligent and have thoughts and feelings. Well, I guess harpies are to a certain degree as well. They're less hysterical, I guess is what I'm trying to say. The idea of the rage mode as well, I mean, we kind of have an experience like that with some of the elite specializations, maybe, right? I don't know. Something about their weird shapes, though, feels odd to me. I can't imagine wearing armor on a Quagon, you know, and all the different fashion wars and customization that would come from that. It'd be a pretty awful... It would have all the problems like Asura have when you're thinking about fashion wars. I mean, it is a unique kind of archetype and idea, especially for MMOs. And maybe you'd argue that having lots of little characters is kind of a good idea. But I don't really see it as a real thing. So I'm going to drop it down to C. I guess I won't have it in D because the novelty of playing a Quagon and like the comic relief that would come from that, I think is kind of cool. I mean, there's comic relief here too. But I don't know, something about it feels more sincere with the Quagon. So we'll go C on Quagon. Next we have the Grawl. Okay, so one of the things I did ball in were the lesser races. So Grawl are obviously on that list. I guess the Quagon are too, for what it's worth. Grawl I actually kind of buy, guys. So the idea of being like the monkey archetype, like the ape, like the simian kind of thing. You know, when I think about Guild Wars and the chart and their cool like run animations and stuff, I could imagine ArenaNet doing a lot of really good work on a Grawl with like its various idols, different sort of walk and run cycles. I can kind of buy a super intelligent Grawl, like some kind of like modified Grawl, maybe the Asura have uplifted it or something in some way, actually working. And I can imagine it being emotional and stuff. It's not pure farce. I actually really kind of like the idea of Grawl. Now, the thing is, does it go A or S? I think I'll leave it at A for now. But something about that really captures me. And again, the idea of like doing like the Wukong, the sun god type thing. I mean, think about like the monkey tonic that we can get. That's obviously not a Grawl that we're playing as there. But there's something nice about that. Are there many MMOs that do like real significant like monkey playable races? I almost want to... it's close to S. It's the top of A, definitely. All right, speaking of another really good race, the next one to come out of the hat is the Kodan. Oh, baby. The Kodan. Kodan are obviously very high. I'm keen to put them on S+ at the moment. Kodan are alongside their Tengu brothers. And to be honest, guys, now here's a funny thing. I actually think I'd rather play a Kodan than a Tengu. The fantasy I've always had with Tengu is wielding a rifle and being like a mechanized Tengu. You know, some kind of industrial Tengu. I think that's like an honor-bound but industrial style character. I don't know whether, you know, that's necessarily built into Tengu, though. For Kodan, I just like the idea of being a giant polar bear, you know. I also, for all of these, you want to think about, like, racial skills and stuff, too. We live in a world where Guild Wars 2 racial skills don't matter very much. I've given you guys proposals over the years on how that might be fixed. I like the idea of thinking of Kodan racial skills kind of alongside how I would think about, like, non-racial skills. I think about, like, the original trailer for Guild Wars 2. When they had that shot of Erstagulkin running along a snowfield next to a Kodan. And way back then, I thought that it was I thought it was bear form. I thought it was a Norn that had become the bear, but instead of a regular bear, they'd become a Kodan. And I was like, wow, that's badass. Turned out it was a whole other thing. They were their own things in lore. I think they have really, really cool lore. I think as well, when we think about the personal story and like, is that a buyable commander? It's a totally buyable commander in terms of the voice, in terms of the disposition. You know, you might have a slightly selfish idea about balance or whatever, but maybe, you know, you're not a totally standard member of your race, as none of the commanders are. So yeah, I think Kodan's excellent, and actually for me personally, I think Kodan's even above Tengu, seriously. And at least I get a Kodan combat tonic. If they did this, a tonic update eventually one day that allowed you to auto-drink tonics and stuff on map swap and whatever, if you could drink combat tonics and ride on mounts on them, I think I'd be a Kodan a lot of the time. The idea of playing a full-blown Kodan with all kinds of special animations, with armor customization, like the idea of being like a leather, a medium armor Kodan, I love. So Kodan's S+, I mean, that's obvious. Next, we got a weird one, the Crate. So Crate doesn't work, okay, at all according to current lore with how the Crate are. If you guys are unfamiliar with like where the Crates sit in world building, you can learn very, very clearly from the initial blog post where they were talking about it in Guild Wars 2 Press. The Crate are made to be evil. Like, Guild Wars 2, you might not have this impression, okay, at this point, but I'm here to tell you that Guild Wars is built with this idea of shades of grey in most places. The idea that you can kind of sympathize with the different factions. There's a space to have a debate about why people are doing or what they're doing. And it's supposed to be a grey setting. You might not have that impression, but that is kind of how it was built. Now, there was one thing in strict defiance of that. One area of the world building that was just saying, no, these guys are just bastards, basically. That's the crate. They're supposed to be irredeemable. So in those terms, I can't really see a crate commander, not if they're going to continue to honor that original idea. But then again, that was over 10 years ago. You could definitely write in some story that establishes a kind of crate society or faction that is a little bit more interested in the Elder Dragon threat and sort of rubbing shoulders with the Free Peoples of Tyria. So, with all of that in mind, if they did that, I think crate actually becomes quite interesting in as much as like you could have a serpentine race. I like snake races. You know, my Final Fantasy playthrough, I've learned about these Ananta kind of snake creatures, which are really cool. So I think crate work there. The Guild Wars 1 crate stuff about metamorphosis and stuff, I'm not so sure how well that maps. The underwater influences might not map too well, but I'm going to leave them at B. I think crate deserve to be at B. I can kind of buy it. I really can, in all armor categories. I'm just thinking here in editing how some of you guys might react to this video, and I'm pretty sure I'm going to get comments saying, but WP, they can't wear shoes. What would you do with the feet armor piece? I mean, you'd re-theme any foot armor is like bangles or something, right? Or any old random thing like that. I don't know. That to me is not a massive roadblock. It's like a little theme, suspension of disbelief thing. It's not enough to corrupt the whole idea. But maybe. Next, we have another antagonistic faction. This is the Centaurs. Centaurs are weird. I don't really believe in them. I mean, in terms of like personality and so on, sure. But just the shape of them, guys. The idea that you're going to be a Centaur, but you're not going to get innate move speed, because Guild Wars doesn't do that. So you're going to be a very slow-moving, like, walking horse character. I mean, you can gender them and stuff, and you can have them be emotional, and you can do all of those things. Armors and stuff are going to look really weird. I mean, if we're going to start factoring in budget and stuff, how difficult this is to implement, I mean, there's no way you'd ever see Centaur, right? Because the idea of just how dramatically they'd have to work every single piece of armor it's on. And mostly, guys, I have to be honest, I mean, is this kind of terrible of me? I just don't think Centaurs are cool. They're just kind of lame. They're like the most lame fantasy creature to me. You know, if you're going to pull standard, you know, things out of the box, I mean, half man, half horse, I don't know. I just don't see it. I'm not in that camp. I think they work well as a bestial society on the fringes of the main societies that are in the spotlight of the storyline. Basically, how ArenaNet have handled them, I think, is done very well. My favourite Centaurs in fantasy are probably the Harry Potter ones, who are very, you know, isolationist and are kind of in that place. So yeah, I'm going to put Centaurs at the bottom, guys. I don't like Centaurs. D. Next. Oh, I've been skipping over this one here. Largos. I mean, Largos are another S+. Oh, God. We don't have anyone in S yet. Basically, I think there's a trinity of S+, and we're already looking at them. Okay? These are the best choices, I think. You got Largos, you got Coden, you got Tengu. Now, Largos are probably kind of iffy in that area. Why? Well, I think that one of the things that's supposed to be important about a new playable race is, like, how that appeals to people outside the MMO. You tell people, oh, it's a bird race, boom, very easy to understand. Polar bear race, very easy to understand. What do you really tell them with Largos? Underwater fish people race? I mean, that kind of connects, I suppose. The wings are a tricky point with these guys, but I do think it's kind of workable. It's kind of the harpy problem. Actually, maybe Largos doesn't deserve to be it. No, it does. Largos are really cool. Largos have a lot of world building, a lot of well, they don't have a lot of world building, but they have a lot of hints at world building, which is more than can be said for other areas. There's a suggestion of a big, broader society. We just haven't seen it because it's underwater. It's not just the wings that are a problem, by the way, but it's the masks as well. You know, if you're going to let them customize their armor and take their aqua breathers and stuff off, I think there's a lot of groundwork to be done with Largos. But if they did that groundwork, they would be a fantastic playable race. I can totally imagine a Commander Largos. I would love to play one. That's why it's an S+. Basically, because I would love to play it. And at the beating heart of this question, right, that's got to be it. Would you really love to play a Centaur? Not really. Would I really love to play a Kraken? Not really. But I would love these top three. So that's probably my... I feel bad to have settled it already so early in the video here. But I think that's my S+ rank. Next, we got a really weird one. I mean, I said sentience that got them on this list. We have ghosts. So this would be like, this isn't necessarily just faux fire ghosts. In fact, End of Dragons with the speakers and stuff might do some interesting stuff with ghosts as well. I don't know, I think they're D, guys. I'm not too into the ghost idea. Yes, very customizable. You know, a ghost that's somehow been cleansed of its faux fire issues mentally. And now it's, you know, now you get to play as that character. Look, I kind of like the fantasy of being a ghost. Like, oh, I can play as a ghost in an MMO. Just think about that. Just strip everything you think about the faux fire, interior, and so on. Just that idea. Playing as a ghost main character, a ghost playable character in an MMO. That's really fascinating to me. That's captivating as a concept. So I'll give it that. And you could do that. And, you know, the kind of the blue glowiness, you could kind of rein in a little bit, maybe. You could sort of have it half fleshy, half incorporeal, maybe. Sort of, you know, a bit like the Mist Stranger outfit, kind of, which is a bit half and halfy. Maybe you could get something in there. Also, you might say visual noise and all that kind of, like, illusory, horrible stuff. I get that that looks a bit lame, but it wouldn't look very out of place in Guild Wars 2 of today, would it? I also love the idea of, like, physical proper armor over, like, an almost translucent flesh. So I don't know, there's some things, ghosts under current lore don't work too well, but maybe you could find it. I'm going to put it in B, just because of that principle of playing an MMO as a ghost. I like that idea. Next we have the Dredge. God. So in lore, the Dredge work very well. They're like S+. 100% buyable that you could be a Dredge. Dredge are like the closest of all those random periphery factions to being major players, you know. If you consider the 5 major races plus like Tengu they were planning at launch Guild Wars 2, right? If you were going to do a 7th, I think it's strictly according to lore, how the society operates, how powerful they can be, what they're doing. Dredge are there, you know. They're good guys in large capacities across both Guild Wars 1 and 2. They're just about out of control in large swathes in Guild Wars 2, you know, based on all the subjugation they've underwent over, you know, at the hands of various other societies that's fostered all the xenophobia and so on. So I don't know, Dredge, according to lore, I really like. However, they're mole people. They're blind. Now, look, you guys might say, well, you can't play them because they're blind, so how do you see anything? But they compensate for that through sonar or whatever, right? Sonar, is that right? Through harmonics. You know, they're moles. They compensate. I think that you can suspend your disbelief, and I think you could just have regular camera and so on. I don't think you have to play into the blindness much. That's not an argument to me. What is an argument down, though, is that the Dredge are kind of lame and wacky looking and kind of comic reliefy. Look, I'll put them higher than the Quaggan. Don't get me wrong. I will put them higher than the Quaggan. In fact, do they get higher than Ghosts? I don't know. Maybe not. But I'm going to leave them in C, okay? No, I think they deserve to be middle of the road. They deserve to be in B. Okay, so Dredge. That's my next one. Okay, next. We got a really stupid one here. Ettins. So, if you're a little bit... Well, the image that I'm going to edit on screen should hopefully make this clear for you guys. These are the Ettins. They're the 2-headed, green, big bastards that wield clubs and run around Kryta. Almost sentient. Now, the idea of playing a character that has 2 heads, has 2 personalities. Now, I'll give you this. In the world where the personality system was still going on, and in a world where these things can be amazingly well funded, so, you know, you're playing as an Ettin, so you get to pick multiple personality system choices and stuff. Now, that's pretty cool. Is that realistic on any level? I don't think so. They're big and dumb, guys. It's got to be D, right? They're too stupid. I can't really buy a Commander Ettin. Not really. It's a funny idea for an April Fool's joke, not much else. And then we got another terrible one here as well. That's Trolls. I always feel like Trolls and Ettins are a bit close, you know. But Trolls look like this, you know, you often find them in the caves and so on. Again, I think they have to go down. I'm actually going to rate them lower than Ettins, because I think Ettins at least would be funny. So, let's do it this way. Troll at the very bottom of the pile. Then Harpy. Then Centaur, then Ettin. Oh, no, Centaur goes higher than Ettin. It's just slightly more realistic, okay? I mean, Centaur's pretty bad, though, with the whole movement thing. That's my rating for the D tier so far. Another terrible one. We got the Nuhawk. So, one of the things I did was I tried to just think of a couple from the expansions. You know, some of the new races there in the expansions. And it will make more sense why this is here in a second. But Nuhawk, I don't think Nuhawk fit because they're too big, really. It's not actually a matter of intelligence. It's not a matter of demeanor. It's not even a matter of fashion wars and stuff. You know, we're suspending our disbelief pretty hard here with a lot of these, that they can map armors and stuff to them. I don't think that it's necessarily... I think the idea of like a super big thing, even bigger than like a Norn or wider than one at least, kind of works. Like maybe like a subspecies of very small Nuhawk. I can kind of buy it. Interesting racial skills with their giant tongues and slams and stuff. But this is a C tier option. This is, if only because of their demeanor, it escapes the fate of the Etin, right? In a lot of ways, it's kind of like the N and stuff. But they are a little bit more buyable as real characters, so I will put them higher. Though in the fight between Quaggan and Nuhawk, I think Quaggan's still coming out on top, frankly. Next, another Heart of Thorns ones, not Heart of Thorns 1, sorry. We have Exalted. Exalted are kind of running into the ghost problem, right? Demeanor, size. They're fine, but it's kind of, they're just a bit magical, right? And the big problem that I can't really get my head around with Exalted is the idea of Exalted in armor and stuff. Like, Exalted are like these incredibly powerful constructs that don't really utilize armor beyond what they are. They're too weird, I think, in the capacity of, like, thinking of them as a relatable character that you'd play in an RPG, like as a construct. I definitely can't buy an Exalted at any point in the story before Heart of Thorns. So you wouldn't get, like, you know, a Divinity's Reach arc as an Exalted, right? It would just be too bizarre, you know? You think about, like, reading Ghosts of Ascalon. Maybe you listen to my audiobook or something, and how grounded that place is, and then there's just an Exalted wander around. Even in-game, like, look at Divinity's Reach, right? Where, you know, you're wandering around there, and you see like, a Char is in the city, and everyone remarks on the fact that there's a simple Char. Now we're talking about, like, an Exalted, like, living among people. It doesn't work. It doesn't work on any level when I even start to open that box. So I think I'll drop them. Also, they're just not that cool. I'm going to put Exalted really low. Better than Trolls, but... I would rather see any of these other ones, because at least they've got comic relief. There's not even comic relief to the Exalted. Alright, next. Now, we actually do have a contender for another S+. Oh, I think I need to redo this. I think I need to leave one at S+. And I think the rest are S, aren't they? Okay, so Awakened. Awakened is what we're going with here. So Awakened are kind of perfect to me in a lot of ways. They're basically... in every way, autonomous, sentient, intelligent creatures, like humans, right? They're correctly proportioned. You can imagine them wearing gear. There is this idea of them not aging or whatever, but if you're like a freshly turned Awakened at the start of the story, you know, maybe your domestic story is that, I can totally imagine an awesome Path of Fire starting point. This would have been a perfect new playable race to have been added with POF. I mean, they're just incredible, aren't they? What's bad about the Awakened? Now, you might say it's a little bit lame or boring, but I say, you know, we talked about this a bit with the ghost thing, but the idea of like having an undead in an MMO, it's a bit tropey, but it's a trope that Arena hasn't covered yet, and tropes are tools. You know, there's a reason that some things become tropes. Guild Wars could do with an undead playable race. That's got massive appeal outside the game. So actually, I'm gonna bump them above Lagos on that ground. And our Awakened... But here's the thing. I want to play a Tengu more than an Awakened. The other cool thing about Awakened is you guys might think, well, how can you customize them? But there's loads of ways you can customize them, right? You can, like, have, the whole tar themes going on. You can have the mummification type stuff going on. You can lean more into the Mordant Crescenty type feel. Or just general citizenry and, you know, skeletal. Like, there's a lot you can do here. So, I think they're very good. They're in the S tier. But I think I want to play a Tengu more and a Kodan even more than that, frankly. Okay, next we have another silly one. We have Ogres. Well, okay, so Trolls, Etins, Ogres, again, you might get them all confused. Ogres, though, are, you know, they're a full-on lesser race. You know, they have a whole arc in the personal story. And, you know, they're intelligent, curious creatures. You even see them among the Pact, right? I mean, that's a good litmus test as well for whether it can be a commander. Do you see it among the Pact? You see Awakened among the Pact. You see Alagos among the Pact. You see Tengu and Kodan. And yeah, you do see Ogres. Ogres are on the big side, don't get me wrong. So they're kind of close to the Norn in some ways. But I think they're interesting, you know? And I like the idea of racial skills to do with pets and stuff. Ogres are actually very, very viable. I'm not that, and I think they deserve A tier, but I personally am not that keen on playing them. So I'm going to drop them down here below Dredge, and I think in retrospect that means I'm going to bump the crate up because I want to be a snake-like character real bad. Okay, so ogres are very credible. Here in editing, you know, the concept art here really strikes me as it would be very weird to see like a spellcasting ogre. It's very clear how much that's mismatched. The concept art's weird as well in Guild Wars, you know, the art style that they've going with here really makes things look very grim and very detailed and very warlike with a lot of these races that just doesn't come across in game in any way. It's much lighter and frothier and more cartoony, which kind of is throwing me a bit. But yeah, I don't know, I probably rated Ogre a bit high there, just because I can't really see the light armors on it. Next, another Leicester race, again in the personal story. In fact, if you're watching my big story playthrough that I kicked up just yesterday, you'll see I just did that arc before closing the first part of the video down. Hylek are very, very good too. Frog people, it's kind of like what we were talking about with Nuhawk, except slightly more realistic proportions now. I don't think you'd ever see a world in which both of these came to Guild Wars 2. That's spellcasting Hylek. Yeah, I can see like engineer Hylek with the turrets that they make and the alchemy and stuff. Because how they map to the various professions is obviously important, not just armor types. Hylek are cool. The only you know what I like the idea of as well? It's like what I mentioned with the Grawl before, like the monkey fantasy. The idea of like swaggering around as a Hylek or leaping and bouncing and having like those kind of stretchy animations on all your idols and stuff. Lots of fun things they could do with a Hylek. Something about them doesn't quite click. I think it's their proportions, and I do actually have a solution for that by the end of this video. So I'm going to put them at the top of B because I think they're fairly realistic. Next, we have the Skrit. Okay, Skrit, again, all those same conversations as we just had. Now, I think for some of you guys watching this video, Skrit are going to be on S+. The Skrit have the advantage of not just being credible commanders, but also very distinct personalities. So the idea of a hyper-enthusiastic, me shiny, Skrit, I think people really like. And it feels like it's very well carved out. It's got its unique place. There is this whole thing about like their hive mind potential in groups that definitely wouldn't map as a commander, I don't think, not very well. I mean, maybe you could just do that in some domestic stories and then that's it. So I kind of buy Skrit. I think Skrit are they're like good in all the ways that Yasura are. Okay, Skrit are pretty good. In fact, I will leave them here at A. Oh, do I leave them here at A? Oh, I'm really struggling with the Skrit. Because I'm kind of not a fan of them. I'm kind of not really that interested in playing as one. No, I'm going to leave it here. I'm going to leave it here. Just take a second, have a breath, and think to yourself, what if ArenaNet announced playable Skrit tomorrow? I mean, I'd be pretty hype and excited about that. I don't know whether that's just because we're in the context where they've never done anything like that. But I'll leave it at A. I'll leave it at A. I think that there is a lot credible about them. And they would be funny, but in all the right ways. Not like too stupid funny. They're on the edge, but I think they just managed to nip over. Which means I'd like to play them even more than these guys down here in the B tier. Next we have Jotun. So, ancient races. Now, Jotun I think are too big. Like some of these other guys, when you start getting too big, it's not a great idea. Now, the idea of, again, like this idea of like uplifting Jotun that have returned to their, you know, their state before they fell apart or whatever. They've had the magic restored to their bloodline and so on. They're a really interesting civilization, powerful civilization, wise civilization with kings and things. There's a lot really fun about Jotun. If you think about like a Guild Wars game set in the ancient history, I could totally buy that you'd play a Jotun in that. So if the lore was twisted ever so slightly, I could see it. They're a lot like the ogres too, you know. But I think because they kind of get this sense of being... What is actually technically bigger, an ogre or a Jotun? Jotun were massive in Guild Wars 1, so I always have the impression of them being absolutely huge. So, let's put the Jotun at the top of C. Yeah, I think they just about beat the Quaggan for me. It's really interesting, isn't it? Very big, very small. Okay, now, why are you doing ancient races, WP? Why is the Jotun even here? Well, because it unlocks stuff like this, Massart. Look, I'm a Guild Wars 1 fan. You know where I'm going with this. I've already dropped it instinctively in S here. I didn't even cognitively mean to do that. I'm a Guild Wars 1 fan. I think the Masat work really well. Yeah, so what? They hover around, right? And yeah, a bit like the Largos, they've got this weird stuff coming out of their back or whatever. Yes, they've got this spellcasting bent. So the idea of heavy armored Masat doesn't quite track. The idea of even medium armor ones doesn't quite track a lot of the time. So maybe they don't get all the way into S. But I'd love to play as a Masat. No, they do. I really like the idea. No, they don't. Alright, there you go. A tier. But Masat is a great choice, isn't it? And likewise with the Masat, what about their brothers? The Seers. Not that they're actually brothers, but you know, they have this ancient connection and storied history with the Seers and their ancient war. I think a lot of Guild Wars 2 fans watching this video won't even really know what I'm talking about when I talk about the Seers here. Because you've just had so little exposure to them. But the idea of the Enigmatic Seers coming back, they're cool in all the same ways that the Masat are for me. This is definitely Guild Wars 1 nostalgia and fanboyism that's affecting these guys. But again, they're the right proportions. And, you know, they're of the right intelligence. And again, they have the same problem of, like, can I really imagine every kind of, like, RPG character being a Seer or a Masat? Maybe not. But, you know, you would expect, especially with the Seers, some visual upgrades and, you know, some changes as we start to see them in Guild Wars 2. All you really have to do is keep the multiple arms and the floating, and you're pretty much there, right? Okay, look, the main thing that has to be said for both the Masat and the Seers, that in editing, I feel I really have to get across, is they're really unbuyable. I almost want to put these in the bottom, because especially when you look at the image of them on screen while I'm talking, because it's like we've seen so little variation in them. You know, all the Masat were wearing that yellow outfit, right, in Guild Wars 1. We've barely seen any Seers ever, so when we think of Seer and when we think of Masat, it's like, it's not very changeable. What about the idea of actually putting all kinds of random weird clothes on the Masat? Does that even feel like a Masat anymore? Or does it just feel like a floating man? So it's kind of hard to get away from those biases, but even still, I do think it works. I sort of just imagine that to be a lot of creative freedom for ArenaNet if they want. In truth, I think Seer is the worst of the two propositions, if only because, like, Seer is, like, quintessentially alien. Like, it's got all that weird stuff around its neck and on its back. It's supposed to be very bizarre, and I think making bizarre stuff playable kind of ruins them. Actually, I think there's an argument for never doing Largos for a similar reason. Another ancient race now is the Dwarves. And oh wow, now we have a very real candidate here. Oh, okay. Dwarves are definitely an S tier. The question is where? I mean, do I even need to explain with the Dwarves? Other MMOs, lots of people like playing Dwarves. There's a kind of player out there that won't even pick up an MMO unless they can play a Dwarf. A lot of people regretted and were upset at the idea that Guild Wars 2 diminished the Dwarves and did their own stuff. And to bring them in now would be kind of like, you know, turning your nose up at what the studio was originally doing. But again, it's been like 15 years since those decisions were made. I like the idea of the Dwarves coming into Guild Wars 2 in a playable capacity. So what is this? Is this a stone dwarf? Or is this a dwarf that managed to avoid the right of the Great Dwarf altogether? I prefer that other idea. That it's actually a flesh and blood dwarf. And they've just been underground, or they've been in some mountain range that we haven't known about for a long time. Maybe some cell of them living out in the Canthan Mountains or something. I think they're a really good idea. I think they're actually a lot more plausible than the Largos. Do they add more to the game or less to the game than the Awakened? Do I want to play an Undead or a Dwarf most? Now, I kind of like Dwarf being up there because a diminutive race, just like I said with the Skrit, just like I said with the Quaggan, it's actually of value, I think, to, like, the pantheon of races we have. Especially if you imagine some of these other ones had been implemented. If we think about it in the order of what would I like to come in first, definitely Kodum first, then I'd like Tengu. These are close. I don't know which one I'd like most. Actually, I think I do. I think I want the Awakened even more. I think you get more variety with the Awakened. Better fashion wars with the Awakened. And Dwarves, as a diminutive race, I don't know how many people are really even that keen on it, right? There are certainly some people that just really, really want Dwarves. The idea as well, like, if we think about each of these as, like, a city is coming with it, or, like, some early story, I definitely would be very excited to see a Dwarf city, interior of today, and Dwarf stories, interior of today, more than I'd be excited to keep looking at the Bone Palace or whatever in the Desolation. I mean, I'd love to do that too, don't get me wrong, I really would. But I think on those grounds, Dwarf wins. But overall, let's keep Awakened on top. So, now we're rounding out the video. Just a couple more to do now here. My god, I'm looking at the timestamp here. We've been talking for ages. So, just a few more. One final ancient race. And that's the Forgotten. So... Forgotten have the advantage. Forgotten have all the advantages of the other ancient races, except they're not quite as cool. I never really thought the Forgotten were that cool. They're snakes though, and after everything I said about the crates, I think I can buy being a Forgotten more than I can buy being a snake, a snake. So in terms of like their context in the current world building and how smart they are and so on. So I think I'd put Forgotten here. I'd much rather play as a Gruul. In fact, Gruul's going to beat both Masat and Seer. I really like that idea of the monkey-type Gruul. Isn't that cool? So yeah, Forgotten here. Above Skrit, I think, probably, because it's a snake race. Snake race is a badass, guys. And it fits quite well. Also, you got the Guild Wars 1 nostalgia, possible fun story connections to the mists and stuff. So playable Forgotten, I think I'd put a there. There's a couple left. All right, finally, why did I have Nuhawk and Heart of Thorns ones? It's because of the Itzel. Now, I think Itzel is actually a very, very credible playable race. Think about it. It's the fantasy of being a playable frog, but with the proper proportions. Yeah, some Itzel are a little bit big when you think about them in the context of Heart of Thorns as enemies. But, you know, you take that away a little bit where they're just big so you can see them or pick them out and so on. I think they're actually really good. They're smart. They're looking to fight the Elder Dragons. I can imagine them, obviously, very easily medium armor. I love this idea of an Itzel in leather stuff and like a scarf around their neck or something. I swear I'm being influenced by a certain Pokemon design when I think of that. What's the Pokemon called with the tongue around its neck? I really like that idea, though, like these kind of stealthy, stalkery frog characters. And I can equally imagine one of them in heavy armor. I think it'll be so badass. Think about like a tanked out Itzel protecting its squishy, pliable flesh. And then even caster variations of them. I think the Itzel's a really cool playable race. Is it just me? So they're definitely in the A tier. I think they beat Gruul as well. Gruul, I love the monkey fantasy, but Gruul are a bit stupid and a bit dumb. You'd have to twist the lore quite a lot. Itzel's pretty viable, pretty quick. I really like the idea of Itzel. Okay, so 2 remain. They're both Path of Fire ones. One of them's going to be very low. Can you guess what it is? Is it even sentience, really? It's the Choya, baby. Okay, yeah, the Choya. They can communicate, but they do it in little clicks and nash, nash, mash, nash, nash. They don't really communicate, do they? I can't imagine this is a commander. This is very low down here. I thought it'd be kind of fun to add it to the list. Who knows? Maybe I mean, they're cute. I like the idea of being an April Foolsy, just pure hilarity, comic relief, cactus character that prickles everyone who gets near him and pokes people. And, you know, worms his way through to the top of the pact or whatever and becomes the commander. But in truth, I think, let's be real, Choya goes pretty low. The other one is really, really challenging to talk about. This is the last one. And it's kind of a big discussion for me. It's the Jinn. Jinn, again, it's like this ghost and exalted thing. But, I mean, they're very, very, like, autonomous and interesting characters. Possibly in the lore, too powerful, too magical. It's a bit weird when you don't have legs, unless it's very clear how you're moving around, like with these snake ideas. I don't know, the Jinn, it might even be stupid to even have the Jinn on the list. I don't see them as particularly credible. It's a cool idea. I think I'm going to put it in the C tier here. I think I'm going to put it in the C tier. And for what it's worth, I do think that they're cooler. I would like to be a Jinn more than I'd like to be a Centaur. I'll put it that way. Playable Jinn would be quite interesting. I just don't know how credible it really is. So, there you have it. Oh, if we move one more up, the distribution looks really good, doesn't it? Alright, let's put Jotun in. No, I'm going to leave it like this. There you go, guys. That's it. That's my tier list for what I would like to see as playable races in the game. Now, I honestly do think, if you look at S+, and S, and I do stand by Coden, for me, at the top. But any of these in S, they're all excellent ideas, right? If you look at S and S+, they're very real concepts. If Guild Wars had maybe been built in a slightly different way or with a lot of elbow grease. And I think you've even got some really, really crazy ideas in A, and especially crazy when you get to B. Probably C and D. I think you're dreaming. But maybe you guys want to argue against me on that. Let me know. Thank you very much for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed this video. Keep an eye out on my channel if you're out of the loop a little bit. earlier this week, or just 2 days ago, I decided to try out YouTube streaming just to see what it's like. So if you look around after having watched this video, you might see a notification that I'm live. Feel free to come along and see how it is. I'm doing a complete story replay through of everything leading up to End of Dragons. And what can I say, the more the merrier. All these experiments to sort of see what kind of content I can do and what you guys will like. So yeah, if you just want to come chat or whatever, hopefully it'll be very obvious to you what's going on. So thanks guys, I hope you enjoyed. Have a lovely day. I'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye now. I just want to note, this was kind of a cool video and topic to come back to. I was thinking and looking at this very hard a while ago when I made my Stellaris mod, where basically all these races and things that I said potentially could be playable, I actually did make playable and put on the galactic stage. I should get around to updating that for current game versions at some point in the future.